Over $125,000 worth of vintage keys have just sold virtually. The hottest books in the world, number 10 on the list, Fantastic Four, number 5, the first appearance of Victor Von Doom. Over $20,000 in sales in 7 days.
The Robert Downey Jr. effect continues again, but this is an outstanding book. A 2.0 just sold for $39.75. That's up 9%. A 2.5 sold for $48.33. That's up 9%. And the 6.0 is up 22% with a $13,000 sale. That's a year high for that grade. Now, 6.0 for this book is actually pretty special. You start getting below 5.550, it's a lot more common, so I can see why you'd want to jump in. And if I was to jump on to any book on this list, this is probably one of the top 2 for me.
What do you think about this cover? Some say it's weak. Number 9 on the list is Marvel Spotlight, number 5, the first appearance of Johnny Blaze, first appearance of the Ghost Rider. The macabre meets the supernatural. The 4.5 is up 22%, the 5.0 3%, the 5.5 6%, the 9.0 holding strong, selling for $4,600. When the percentage increase is right around 5 to 10% across the board, there are more sales. Peep Key Collector to see them all. It shows confidence in the price that the book is going for right now. And we have that Ryan Gosling rumor that he may portray Johnny Blaze on the big screen. It doesn't really matter. That would be huge. I think it will push this book up even more. But Ghost Rider is inevitable, and that's why people are putting money in now as we get closer to the holiday season.
Speaking of Key Collector comics, go ahead, spend some time. Download that.
ComicTom101 supports the show. You get a 2-week subscription. Most of the app is free, though. You don't need to pay for this thing for it to be a vital tool in your hunting grind. And New York City Comic Con is just a couple months away, and books are getting so damn cheap. We'll prove it to you because this list is filled with vintage books that I think are selling at great prices. And I'll prove it with number 8 on the list, Uncanny X-Men 94, one of the most important Uncanny X-Men comic books of all time. Chris Claremont begins his run here. Over $6,000 in comic sales have taken place in 7 days.
You smell that fresh air because it's a fresh list. No Wolverine 1 and no New Mutants 98. But we got this book, and we just saw a year-high sale at a 4.5 go for $375. That's up 11%. The 6.0 is up 13% for $515 sale. The 6.5 is up 14%. And the 9.4 just sold for $3,900. That's up 18% on this beautiful gem.
You're right. No Wolverine 1, no New Mutants 98 on this list this week. They have completely fallen off, and that means that there weren't more than 3 sales that trended above the recent 12-month average in the last 7 days on those books. That's what it takes to get a book on our list.
This is the X-Men we're most familiar with, okay? And this is why this book is so prevalent. We got early appearances, outstanding storytelling, incredible artwork, okay? And for a book like this that has only 43 copies and 9.8, when you have Marvel Spotlight, which has 5 copies of 9.8, we're going to get to books higher on this list with far greater copies and that high of a grade. And that's really telling on the prices that these books are reaching.
2 different 9.6s have emerged on the CGC census in the last 2 weeks. While people are purchasing books based off of the movie they just saw, Deadpool Wolverine, others are investing in vintage X-Men. I like it, and I like this book. Number 7 on the list, people also like. They love premiere issues, as do I. Captain America 100.
This is that launching point where people are getting their own title. So Cap 100, Hulk 102, Silver Surfer 1, Submariner 1. This was a great time for Marvel's history as they're flooding the newsstands with these premiere issues. And people love it because we're seeing great covers highlighting the main hero. And it's a great launching point for you as a collector to get into a title without having to buy the first appearance of Captain America or Submariner.
We'll kick you off with a year-high sale, and ooh, someone overpaid. A 5.0 just sold for $473, up 89%. You could have paid half of that. Hit the subscribe button. Watch the show. 7.5 is up 10%. The 8.0 is up 20%. The 9.0, 11%. The 9.2 is up 3%. I think Captain America Brave New World is absolutely helping this book. The trailers, Harrison Ford. People are excited about Sam Wilson, as am I. But this book doesn't need that excitement. This book is awesome no matter what and great for any PC.
Number 6 on this list, Uncanny X-Men 266. 27 sales in the last week above the 12-month average for a total of $5,400 spent.
That right there is the first full Gambit. And Channing Tatum, dare I say, is scared. Like, no joke.
For an actor who's known to be taking outfits or suits or some type of wardrobe from films that he's done, he did not want to take the Gambit suit for this movie. And I think he's afraid because he doesn't want to cross Marvel. He doesn't want to lose this job. He is so excited to play this character that if he took that potential costume and did something he shouldn't have, he would have pissed off somebody there.
This dude has said a lot of crazy things in the last few weeks about what he would do to get Gambit back on the screen. And I think the sales are reflecting that.
We've seen this book on this list 7 times now, and the volume that it trades at is bonkers. We had 3 copies that outsold the average. A 9.0 went for $175. That's up 10%. 3 copies in 9.2, up 20% with a $200 sale. The 9.4, $250, up 32%, and 8 copies sold in that grade. A newsstand sold for $300 and a 9.4 that's up 35% for a year high sale. And 5 copies outsold the average in a 9.6 with a high of $310. That's up 31%.
In the last 7 days, there's been 4 new 9.8s added to the census, making the grand total over 3,800 copies. That's a whole lot, which is why this book is trending just about what it's been going for all year long. In fact, the last sale was literally exactly the 12-month average, selling for $634. At this rate, this could also be a sub-$500 book in the near future, depending on how much marketing and how much pushing Channing Tatum does over the next few months.
All right, it's time for an explicit plug for an explicit book, and there's only one way to deliver it, and that's with some F-bombs. You guys need to go sign up because there's only 10 days left to get this fucking book that's extremely fucking violent because it's in a fucking poly bag, and if you're not doing yourself a fucking favor, then what the fuck are you doing?
ComicTom101.com, John Boy Myers in every fucking box. There's a poly bag. It even says it right there. Explicit content. Join the community. Support the show. There's other stuff going in there. Peep the website while we talk about number 5 on the list with Amazing Spider-Man number 1. One of the most important blue chip keys with one of the worst covers. Is that a hot take?
You don't like this cover either, huh? Yeah, I don't blame you, but regardless, for the first solo Spider-Man, number 1 issue, we had $42,000 in sales this week.
Only 4 different sales to report on. Look at this. Incomplete copy, 0.5. An intro grade up 3%, selling for $3,200.
Most of the time, your goal in getting a 0.5 is to get something maybe missing an interior page or a back cover, so you still have that amazing eye appeal. This sold for over $3,000 with the whole bottom right section of the book missing. So that tells you how in demand this book is in any grade.
The 3.0 is up 15%, selling for $9,200. The 4.5 is up 3%, selling for $10,400. And the 6.0 sold for $19,100, up 4%. How do the prices feel on this book right now?
This is a big deal. I don't think people truly understand unless you've been in this hobby for a long time, because I haven't seen this for many, many, many years, because I've been doing this for over 25 years. I've seen ups and downs. But when you see a kind of a leveling out in price almost across the board and then eventually it jumps, it's best for most collectors to get into that higher end by paying just a little bit more, because at some point they will separate themselves again, as they tend to do. It can't be a flat price all across every grade. And so we're going to look back, and I've said this many times already, in about 2 years, and people are going to be kicking themselves for not committing to these books at the price points they could have had them at.
It's such a competitive price for upwards of a half a point or even a full point for some of these books. And that's a tough decision to make, but it's the decision that a lot of investors are making, which is why this list is filled with vintage this week.
Back-to-back Spideys, and that doesn't happen very often with 2 vintage books like this, but number 4 is Amazing Spider-Man number 5. Now, not the greatest cover, okay, and I'm not a big Steve Ditko fan for Spidey. Crushed it with Doctor Strange. All right, but regardless, this is an important book. This is the first major villain to cross over from one title to another, pretty much connecting the universe together. And Spider-Man and Doom meet here, and they have a great battle through the pages. A really fun book. First Betty, well, not really first Betty, but this is the first time you really see Spider-Man's first love interest happen here with Betty Brant, being noticed by him.
That's right, making Peter Parker extremely relatable, skyrocketing this title from Marvel. And we have a 4.5 up 18%, 5.0 with a year high up 30%, selling for $1,500, and a 7.5 sold for $4,400. That's up 15%. And this right here is the epitome of, depending on what Marvel does with Dr. Doom and Robert Downey Jr., this could be one of the biggest moments, most impactful moments on the big screen in the next decade. If you can imagine Robert Downey as Victor Von Doom and seeing the other members of the 616, the Avengers, maybe even Tom Holland, how jarring of a moment that's going to be when they see that this guy looks just like Tony Stark. Well, that's going to be this moment here, the first battle between Spider-Man and Dr. Doom. And that's if they go that direction. And that's if there's any type of connection beyond the way he looks on the screen.
I'm stoked for that moment because I can see Tom Holland's Spider-Man just completely shook and jarred by the greatest hero becoming now one of the greatest villains in the MCU. But coming in number 3, Incredible Hulk number 340. Tell me about it, Tom.
19 different sales, over $5,000 worth of money has moved virtually this past week. And I find it intriguing that this is getting a little bit of the Deadpool effect. But I also think on a larger scale that this comic transcends Deadpool and is one of the most wanted books to be added to a PC. That if I made a list of top 10 books you can get for under $1,000 at a 9.8, if you hunt for it, this would be towards the top of that list.
19 different sales, but no 9.8s above the 12-month average, which lets me know that it's probably where it needs to be. But we had a 9.2 sell for $300. That's up 45%. 4 copies in that grade went this week. A 9.4, $285. That's up 20%. The newsstand 9.4 sold for $395 for a year high, up 40%. And the 9.6 sold for $525, up 54%. And we saw 6 copies in that grade.
You heard that right. Someone paid more money for a 9.2 than what a 9.4 just went for. That tells me that people just be shopping this comic book. But with a McFarlane cover, no surprise. Number 2 on the list, we got Giant Size X-Men, issue number 1. Now, we talked about X-Men 94 in that low 9.8 census count. The census count on Giant Size X-Men number 1 was a total of 248 9.8s. And since the last time we chatted about this book, just over a month ago, there's been 3 new 9.8s added. How does that feel?
That is actually way more than I expected if you had just blindly asked me walking by on a street. Okay, because, I mean, if I think about it, 74, 75, Marvel is hitting their stride, and they are pumping out books, but this is still a square-bound book, a white cover, could be notorious for spine splits, could be notorious for staple rust. But to have that many, I mean, I think the price point for this at around $25,000 to $30,000 in a 9.8, I think is kind of where it's selling. Tells you how important of a book this is to have that many 9.8s and still selling for, 5 figures.
And to prove the point that you brought up earlier, it's getting to a point where the half a point is getting so volatile. Take a look at these numbers. The 4.5 this past week sold for $1,800, and that's a year high and an increase of 22%. Someone paid $100 less for a 5.0 this past week for an increase of 3%. But take a look at this. If you go 1 grade point up when you compare it to that 4.5, from a 4.5 to a 5.5, someone paid $75 more. $1,875 for an increase of 6%. There was a 9.0 that sold for $4,600. That's selling just at that 12-month average, which brings us to the number 1 hottest book in the world, with over 26 different sales taking place this last week, with over $8,000 worth of monies moving hands virtually. We have, for the second week in a row topping the charts, Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, issue number 8, The Origin of the Symbiote.
Man, has this book picked up steam since a couple weeks ago. We were talking about picking up this book sub 500 as a 9.8. Like, it was almost a no-brainer, we thought. And now you're kind of missing that opportunity, even though we just saw 14 new 9.8s hit the census in the last week and 70 total books hit the census completely. I mean, that's bonkers to hear, and this book is going up, and people are stoked for Venom and anything Venom related.
The 7.0 has its year high selling for $179. 4 9.2s outsold the 12-month average, up 11%. 7 9.4s outsold the average, up 20%. 6 9.6s outsold the average, up 26%. A 9.8 sold for $600. So they didn't care. Hey, $500, I'll pay an extra $100. I got to secure a 9.8 right now. Type of mentality, up 19%. And then we have a Canadian price variant, 9.8. This book is scarce as hell. And that sold for $18.50, and that's up 6%.
This census will continue to grow. This is too common of a book. I am not a buyer at $600 for this. I see this book in a 9.8 for $500, and I really want it as a collector. I'll pull the trigger. And that's about where it should be, because these numbers are only going to get larger, and I don't think the demand is there. And I'm picking this up after the Venom movie, and I'm going to get it for a deal. I'm not going to buy on the hype.
Let us know if you agree with the Golden Age Guru. And, of course, as always,
give me a follow on Instagram, Golden Age Guru. Until then, geek responsibly.
Enough said.
Geek Collector Comics, have you done yourself a favor and downloaded that shit? If not, do it. If you're going to mention Geek Collector, remember, you got to download that shit. No. That's not the right shit. Geek Collector Comics, the app. If you haven't downloaded, download that shit now. Do yourself a favor, leave this video, download that shit, Geek Collector Comics, and then come right back and watch it twice.